Unit 2, Clock Fractions. Before we begin, let's review our knowledge of fractions using the money model. Take a look at this poster just to refresh your memory. When we're thinking of a fraction, such as 1/2 or 1/4, we can also relate it to money because money is important to us after all. You should have a copy of these notes in your math journal. If you don't, now would be a good time to pause the video and make sure that they're in your notebook. Okay, so now let's talk clock fractions. Turn to page 34 of your student book. In your student book, you will notice there are 6 different clock faces. Next to 5 of them, there are fractions. We're going to discuss these. But before we do that, let's think about time. Time is everywhere. We need time. We need to know the time. But most importantly, we need to know the value of a clock and time and what it means to us. So we can break a clock up into 2 ways. Let's take a look. This clock is broken up into 12 pieces. Those 12 pieces are broken up even further. Do you see? Okay, so there's how many minutes in an hour again? I forget. Do you remember? Yeah, that's right. 60 minutes in an hour. Good job. Okay, so when we think of time, then we should think of there being 60 minutes in an hour. Go ahead and write that down in the very first top left clock on your worksheet. Okay, now if there's 60 minutes in an hour, how can I break that down even further? They're broken down into sets, so 60 minutes, and as we said earlier, there's 12 different parts in a clock, right? Because the clock's labeled from 1 through 12. Yes, you're right. There are 12 sets of 5 minutes. So essentially, if I multiplied 12 by 5, I should get 60, which explains why there's 60 minutes in an hour. Is this making sense? I hope so. If not, now would be a good time to look over your notes. Take a look at the clock in your classroom. Or think about the number corner we did last month, because we did talk about time in a lot of this. Now let's go back to page 34 in your student book, and let's go over these fractions. Make sure you have something out you can shade with. I highly recommend a highlighter, but I would wait to highlight until you've divided your clock up. Okay, so we have to divide this clock up into half. How might you think of dividing this clock up into half? Well, what makes a half of an hour? If you said 30 minutes, you are absolutely right. 30 minutes make up a half an hour. Okay, so let's talk about how we can write this as a fraction. But before we do that, let's shade in the clock, just like so. Okay, great. So we know that a half of an hour is 30 minutes. What fraction is that? Well, as you can see, it's 30/60ths because it's 30 minutes out of 60 total. How else could we write this? Is this the only way to write 1/2 as 30/60ths? Is there any other way you can look at the clock? Take a minute to think about it. Did you round up these ideas? 6 sets of 5 minutes over 12 sets of 5 minutes, because 6 sets of 5 are shaded out of 12 total sets of 5. Or 3 sets of 10 minutes if you broke these up into 10 pieces, broke these up into sets of 10 minutes over 6 sets of 10 minutes. These are all equivalent fractions. The only reason I'm showing you out of how many minutes is because that's what we're relating it to, time. Isn't that amazing? Okay, maybe you're not as excited as I was, but I think that's pretty cool to think of a clock when trying to find equivalent fractions. That's amazing. Okay, now let's take a look at the next one, 1/4. Can you think of how we can divide this clock up into fourths? Take a minute to try to divide with your pencil. Pause the video before going on. Is this how you shaded your clock? If so, awesome job. Okay, so this shows me that 15 minutes is 1/4 of an hour, which would be 15 out of 60 or 15/60ths. Can I write this any other ways? Now would be a good time to pause the video. Look at 1/2 and how we solved. Try to come up with 2 different ways that you can write 30/60ths as a different fraction. Is this what you came up with? If so, I'm so proud of you. 3 sets of 5 minutes out of 12 sets of 5 minutes. So an equivalent fraction would be 3/12. Or if you were really up for a challenge, 1/2 sets of 10 out of 6 sets of 10 minutes. That's a tricky one. Okay, this one's not going to be as easy, but I want you to try to tackle this one on your own. In fact, I'd like for you to try to tackle the last 3 on your own. I'll be around to help. We'll go over the rest as a class.